In the midst of a catastrophe, some heroes tried at all costs to save the Earth. One of these heroes was Jahui Jin, known as the Star of the Sword. After witnessing Kang Xian, the only one who could end the macabre game planned by otherworldly entities, die, the young girl asks as her last wish for a second chance. The gods decide to accept, and thus, the girl returns 10 years into the past. More prepared, she decides to find Xian as quickly as possible and protect him at all costs. When the lead begins, the protagonist, who only wanted to provide a better life for his little brother, is forced to abandon his plans and fight to survive the first round. However, amidst the chaos, Juno ends up disappearing, and Kang decides that he will go over anyone necessary to find him. Fortunately, he has a guardian angel willing to do anything to make that happen. The story begins by talking about a catastrophe that happened out of nowhere and marked the beginning of the League. We discover that as the League progressed, humanity was disappearing. However, some heroes were on the brink of success in the final round, ready to restore everything. One of these heroes, badly injured, launches an attack with the strength he has left. Laughing, Administrator Jay says that it is a shame, as the young man was very close to winning. Totally exhausted, the boy collapses on the ground. A little further away, a girl screams asking Kang Xian to get up. The administrator says it is the first time he has seen someone reach the final round. But since neither of them will be able to win, they should just be grateful for having received the attention of the entire universe. Before ending everything, Jay states that if the young girl has any request, he will gladly fulfill it as a reward for the entertainment. Quite hurt, the girl asks for one more chance. The villain says he cannot do that unless the gods allow it. Then he turns and says goodbye, leaving Jin Jae-hee, known as the Star of the Sword, alone and putting an end to the 8th round. Sometime later, we see the young girl waking up in her bed. Startled, she gets up quickly and, after looking around, realizes she is in her apartment. Her phone rings with messages sent by Lee Ho-sung and Park Min-ji. Upon checking the date, the girl sees that she has returned 10 years into the past and that her friends are alive, and questions how that is possible, since the administrator stated he could not provide a second chance. Caught in that confusion, Jin concludes that this means Kang is also alive, and hurrying to get ready, she asserts that she needs to find the young man, because the League will start in a few hours. We discover that no matter how strong the players are, the League is a faction battle, and the boy is a key piece. Known as the Great Lord of Mangya, he was the only one to come close to victory. Determined to team up with the boy from the beginning, the Star of the Sword rushes to her destiny. We are taken to the Manan district in the city of Anyang, Dayam-Yidu, where two men are impressed by the willpower of another colleague. We see the protagonist giving his all to complete his part of the job. Upon finishing, he says it wasn't so bad after all. One of the men states that the boy will wear himself out if he keeps up that pace, and questions whether he has given up on studying, confirming Kang says he cannot eat a diploma, and when asked why he works every day without a break, he states that his desire is to give a good life to his little brother. The old man hands him an envelope with payment and says he should go home early to celebrate his younger brother's birthday. After work, our boy heads to Onyx Mall and tells a store attendant that he is looking for something for a 13-year-old boy. The woman shows a jacket and says that younger boys usually wear that over their school uniforms. Thinking, the protagonist concludes that buying that will make it harder to buy food and pay the electricity bill. But after receiving a call from Chuno asking to eat chicken for his birthday, he decides to take the jacket and the food. After all, that date only happens once a year. Looking at the bag, the boy says that this is his first time buying clothes that cost more than 100,000 won, and is happy to be able to give something nice to his little brother. As he approaches the elevator, he discovers that it is not working and questions what could be happening. A guy decides to use the emergency exit but encounters something strange. The protagonist decides to see where that smoke is coming from, but when he looks inside, something pushes him out and closes the door. Suddenly, a voice comes through the speaker announcing that the store will close at that moment. Our boy looks at the phone and, seeing there is no signal, concludes that the problem is not just in the mall. The situation leaves everyone in panic, until a blue screen appears in front of everyone, with a message informing that currently all present are connected to Area 2, and that, based on the summit meeting, the Earth's population must be forcibly reduced. This means that from that moment on, they are targets of extermination policy, and since it is an inevitable measure applicable to all forms of life, the species have no right to refuse. Xian tries to understand what it means to be qualified to participate in the League. However, Asura appears, interrupting his thoughts. With its red eye, the creature observes everyone present, starting an unprecedented collective hysteria. People begin to run desperately, except for our boy, who can only think of his brother who is alone at home. He looks at what his options would be to get out of there, and amidst that chaos, decides that he will find a way to leave the mall and get home. We are taken to one of the areas of the parking lot, where people find themselves cornered by creatures with green skin and glowing eyes. It is revealed that the League's plan is to reduce humanity to a quarter. Obeying orders, the monsters begin the massacre, and, amidst the screams, Jin appears and, remembering the first principle he learned from Kang, states that it is necessary to move to avoid death. Using her sword, the young woman slices through the monsters. We discover that she took 2 to 3 hours climbing all the floors just to find the boy, all because she trusts that he can indeed put an end to the League. We see that a kind of root has taken over the entire building. while the protagonist reaches yet another blocked exit. The people around him continue to run and scream without stopping, and he concludes that there is no way to get out of there. Suddenly, a young woman wearing a blindfold and with pink hair appears. After passing by everyone unnoticed, she claps her hands and asks everyone to concentrate so that it ends faster. Introducing herself as Administrator Ka from the Cosmic Ecosystems Management Department. Explaining, the woman says that those living on Earth have been designated as a disruptive species that must be eradicated, and even though she feels bad about it, she must enforce the policy. A woman approaches the administrator and asks why she is doing this. Stating that she respects people's choices, the creature says that the extermination policy has laws. Therefore, everyone must vote, and those who choose X do not need to participate in the league. Showing a large clock, she says they have 5 minutes. Obviously, everyone starts running towards the X, except for Cheyenne, who decides to vote for the circle, leaving people in shock at the young man's choice. Not knowing that he does not support the policy, he only knows that this is the only way to stay alive. 2 guys ask him to go to the other side. Catching him by surprise, Ka begins to speak to our boy using telepathy and, stating that his choice is interesting, says that this is a private communication because she has an offer, where if the young man can bring people to the circle, he will earn something cool and will not be penalized if he fails. Thinking about everything he has seen up to that moment, Kang loudly states that those who choose X will die. People start laughing and ask if the boy thinks he is the protagonist of some movie. Asking if everyone read the explanations, the protagonist reminds them of the part that said it was not possible to refuse to participate in the league, which means it's better for them to be cautious if this is a real situation. With only a few seconds left before time runs out, people decide to listen to the boy and start moving to the circle. With only 2 people remaining at the X, thinking, our boy prays that what the admin said is false. Smiling, Ka says that time is up, and in the blink of an eye, the guy and the girl who were on the other side simply explode. Astonished, Cheyenne realizes that the woman was telling the truth. She praises him for his good work and rewards him with a firearm, which contains 10 bullets. But if the projectiles are not sold by the League, the young man will never find them again. When asked if there are items that will be sold separately, she says he will find that out later. Suddenly, a strange noise catches everyone's attention. We see a person descending the stairs and begging for help before being slaughtered by a monster. People question what the hell that could be. Meanwhile, the protagonist concludes that the league has just begun. Laughing, Kay says it's time for them to move and embrace reality, and disappears. The crowd starts running from the creatures, but many end up being caught quickly. Hiding, Kang wonders how he will get out of this massacre alive. But remembering Juno, he decides to fight. Suddenly, a monster appears beside him and strikes without hesitation. Our boy manages to defend himself, but the creature is fast and hits him with its mini knife. Wounded, the young man states that it's time to flee, but when he looks back, he realizes the enemy is thrashing on the ground. Not knowing what to do, he spots the dagger and questions whether there is another way to get out of there without killing. Upon concluding that he has no other choice, he starts running with a knife in hand, and to avoid leaving his little brother alone in the world, he plunges the blade into the goblin's back, making strawberry juice fly everywhere. Dropping the knife's handle, the protagonist realizes he is trembling. But with no time to waste, he decides to focus on finding a way out of that place. Chaos continues and people climb whatever they find in front of them to save themselves. However, to everyone's surprise, something starts hitting the creatures. Our boy wonders what is happening, and seeing coat hangers, declares that he will take action. A guy running asks someone to help him, before being pulled back by Cheyenne, who thinks that when the monsters fall, they can't get up immediately, which means they have nothing special. Shouting, he tells everyone to get out of the goblin's way. 2 guys obey, and when they move aside, they end up making 2 of the little monsters collapse to the ground. The protagonist then says they can survive this if they join forces. They just need to change direction while running and wait for the monster to fall to the ground to finally attack with anything. Some people decide to follow the plan and grab whatever they find on the ground. Shocked, a guy stares at the young man and wonders who he is. After some time battling, he approaches and says that our boy is incredible. Then introducing himself as Gwon Gyeong-soo, a former Special Forces soldier. Thinking, Kang realizes it would be advantageous for them to stick together. But at that moment, no one wants to do that. So he just says he didn't do anything special, just observed how the enemies acted and used that to his advantage. The young man wonders in thought how he managed to notice that amid the chaos and still play the leader. When asked about the next step, our boy looks around and says there's no time to waste. Therefore, they need to make a barricade to prevent the monsters from attacking more people. This way, it will be possible to keep everyone safe inside the circle and attack the enemies from above with the rods. Then he reminds the ex-soldier that this is just the tutorial. He agrees with everything while reflecting on how good the young man is in various aspects. Upon realizing what the duo is doing, other people offer help, accepting. Cheyenne distributes tasks and takes full leadership of the group. Suddenly, something starts coming from the side of the escalator, putting everyone on alert. We see goblins fleeing from Jin. The protagonist asks everyone not to attack. After finishing off the enemies, the girl approaches, and our boy concludes that she is worse than the monsters while she seems relieved to find him. Everyone comments on how impressive the young woman is. Looking at our boy, the sword star asks him not to let his guard down, and stabbing her weapon into one of the goblins, states that the creatures have great regenerative abilities, and can recover from minor injuries in a few minutes. The young man says she seems to know a lot about the monsters. Lighting a cigarette, the girl reveals that she has been through this before. Won Daeong-soo asks how things are on the other floors, and she says that this is the place with the most survivors, since from the second basement to the 7th floor, she found many corpses. Reflecting, the protagonist wonders how it is possible she fought alone from down there to here, using only a single weapon. Out of nowhere, Jin states that she tried to find Juno, but couldn't, so now they must focus on the first round. Upon hearing that, our boy draws the weapon he received and points it at Jin, then asking how she knows he has a little brother. Without answering, the girl says they should talk somewhere else. The dude heads to a bathroom and with a revolver aimed at her. The young woman says that this is her second time participating in that crazy game, immediately revealing her name. Explaining, she says that in the other timeline they met 5 years after the start of the league and they reached the end of the game with several other players where some wanted the money, others wanted freedom, and some fought fiercely for their king. But in the end, everything went wrong, and this time she decided to meet the monarch of the strongest faction from the last league in advance. Kang apologizes and says he is not interested in that, so it's better for the young woman not to talk about her brother anymore. The Sword Star asks if he doesn't want to save the little one. She then mentions that the first round must have already started somewhere else and that it's only possible to leave the mall after the tutorial ends. However, even if he manages to do that, it won't be easy to survive alone with a child. Thus, since she knows what will happen, she will help him if the young man agrees. Thinking it over, the protagonist decides to stay with the girl until he finds Shuno, but only after she tells him who is the person he wants to kill the most, since she seems to know him very well. Without hesitation, Jae says she knows that the young man wants to kill his aunt. Having never told anyone about the woman, Cheyenne decides to believe the young woman. However, he states that this does not mean he trusts her. Before they go back, the young man asks if he was able to protect his brother until the end in the other timeline. Denying, the girl says that when she met him, he was already alone, and since no one ever dared to ask how the little one died, she also doesn't know what happened, only that he no longer had emotions. Our boy concludes that his brother may have died while he was in the mall, but Jin tells him to stay calm, as not even a day has passed yet, and reveals that from that moment on, it will have to face humans, not monsters. Ka appears and congratulates the survivors, and then states that everyone there will rise in the players' league. Creatures appear playing trumpets while confetti flies everywhere. People wonder if those little ones are also monsters. Once the march is over, they stop, and what seems to be the leader smiles wickedly as he says he will announce the theme of the first round. We find out that people will have to play the king's game and will have to fight each other to advance. The little demons start flying, shouting that they must split into 3 teams, each with a king. Thus, if the king is killed, the entire team will be eliminated until only one group remains. We learn that everyone on the 7th floor will be part of the red team, and that the king will be Kang Cheyenne. The admin says she was already expecting that and sees no one more qualified. She then states that the king can see the status window and his team indicator. In real time, everyone watches as the kings of the other teams are chosen. Thinking, the protagonist says that the blue team is twice the size of his and that the black team can apparently hide their location. Ka says that the round will start in 10 minutes and hopes everyone has fun. Thinking, Jin concludes that the system is skilled at identifying individuals who possess the qualities of a good leader and that, in this case, Cheyenne needs to evolve more quickly, as the first round is the central training. And in the next one, he will have to choose which players will receive artifacts. Suddenly, other people start coming down the stairs. Taking the lead, Dong-gil Kim, the mall manager, introduces himself as the representative of the blue team and, apologizing for what happened, states that his group brought some food for everyone. A woman asks if it's safe to eat that, and smiling, the man says yes. While analyzing the environment, he notices that there is someone intelligent on the red team. Even so, he concludes that their floor is superior because of the food court, and that it might be better to take advantage of that situation to find the king. Our boy approaches and asks what they want there. A bit irritated, the manager asks the young man to stay calm and says he is only there to provide supplies, since he prefers to cooperate rather than obey the terrorists who want them to kill each other. Seeing through it all, the protagonist tells the man to shut up and says he knows they are there to find out who the king is and kill him at midnight. So if he really wants to cooperate, he should bring the king of the blue team or leave. Feeling the barrel of the gun against his abdomen, the manager throws himself back, causing the other suited guys to charge forward. Kang tries to find a way not to use his bullets, while Jin disarms all the enemies and Rendendo Dong questions if he forgot that attacks cannot begin before midnight. The man says he understands that this is a no and leaves. Remembering what the girl just did, the protagonist admits that he cannot deny how impressive her power is. He then announces that the next step is to move the base to the first floor, to stay away from the blue team and gather the remaining members of the red team who are still scattered. Reflecting, he concludes that the men in suits are well trained, so distancing from them is crucial. But it would be interesting for someone to keep an eye on them. The protagonist assigns this task to the young girl in the cap and tells her to gather as much information as she can. Meanwhile, at the blue team's headquarters, the men assert that they need to attack immediately. Disagreeing, the manager assaults one of his allies and claims that now that he has the king in his hands, he is the one giving the orders. Therefore, everyone must start the cleanup. Listening to everything, the Sword Star realizes that the round will not be easy at all, and remembering the orders she received from the young man about killing the enemy team's king, she says she will fulfill them no matter the cost. After some time, we see that the red team managed to get goblin jerky. Guan decides to be the guinea pig and try it first. Everyone is eager for the taste to be good, but the boy only says it is edible and they will have to get used to it. We arrive at day 2 and discover that Cheyenne is leading 39 people. Additionally, they reach the first floor and found several corpses. Quickly, the protagonist concludes that it was not a goblin that did this, but rather the system that eliminated those who tried to leave their floors before the time. While cleaning up, a girl tells one of the dead that she will ensure his body is properly buried. The group had to drink water from the toilet, and the next objective for our boy is to improve the barricade. After several hours, he asks his allies to rest a bit. A man asks if the young man will not sleep as well, but he says he is fine while thinking that there is one more thing he needs to do. Sitting, staring at the weapons he has, he says he needs to increase his team's killing power until it is comparable to the others. Suddenly, 2 people talking catch his attention. It is Lee Julian along with her brother Lee Sebian. Our boy remembers that Jin asked him to keep an eye on the duo. Happy, the young girl comments on her spear. Being able to see the status window, Kang concludes that spears are more advantageous and, approaching, asks if the girl can make more weapons. She confirms and says she has a pile of daggers she picked up on the 7th floor. In the midst of work, the protagonist ends up falling asleep and returns to the past, reliving the day he woke up in the middle of the night and decided that he no longer wanted to be alive. June appears and questions what he is doing. Running, her boy approaches and hugs the little one while apologizing. He wakes up screaming his little brother's name, who must be alone at home. Stibian asks if the boy had a nightmare, then stating that he put everyone to work. The protagonist says that is not enough. Disagreeing, the boy says that, in fact, it can be useful, even if it's a bit rough. Upon discovering that he slept an entire day, Cheyenne thinks to himself that he really messed up. Joyvan hands him a coffee and says he doesn't need to want to do everything alone, since he is surrounded by older people who will do anything to get back home. Ka appears, startling everyone. Smiling, the admin says that it was very touching, that since everything is a bit stagnant, a special game will be held to speed things up. Thus, in 4 hours, if any team fails, they will receive a significant penalty. We find out that the special game will be capture the flag, and that one flag for each team is located on 3 different floors. Thus, the blue team's flag is on the 3rd floor, the black team's flag is on the 6th floor, and the red team's flag is on the 9th floor. And to advance to the next phase, it is enough to grab their own flag. A man questions what the penalty would be, and at that moment, his head and 3 others explode. The admin says that complaining is good once or twice, but they need to stop thinking that they can just sit and wait for the king's game to end. As no one else speaks up, she says that now, during the 4 hours, everyone must learn what survival means. Amid the panic, Cheyenne says they will get the flag, just as they kill the monsters. A man complains, and the young man asserts that in that case he can just stand still and die. Since no one there will save him, another person asks what happens if they run into the black team. But the protagonist claims that the plan is not to grab the red flag. On the 7th floor, Guan and the others gather as much jerky as they can. Suddenly, a noise catches the young man's attention, and when he goes to check, he discovers that the blue team is there. The suited men decide to go down after finding nothing, while boasting about being in greater numbers. Jiang asks his allies to go down the emergency stairs carrying all the meat. We are taken to the 3rd floor, where the blue team is preparing to grab their own flag. The problem is that there is a monster guarding the object. Feeling important as the manager, Dong orders 2 young men to grab the item. On the ground, one of the boys fears that this might be his end, and unfortunately for him, his fear is not unfounded as the creature quickly devours him. The suited men do nothing, just watching, until suddenly white smoke appears. The group leader quickly realizes that this is being caused by a fire extinguisher. However, something attacks a guy's arm. Then, everyone starts getting hit and panics. The manager wonders who is doing this and immediately orders his men to deal with the archers. Since they are in greater numbers, several spears fly toward the team, while the red team's extinguisher squad continues to spread smoke. The leader questions whether those people have been hiding there from the beginning to kill him. Shouting, he tells the others to move away from where the projectiles are coming from. At the center of it all, Kang says it's time to go to the opposite side. We go back 30 minutes when he shared his plan to attack the blue team. Since their flags are close to each other and confrontation is inevitable, our boy says this is the only chance to break the power gap between the teams. Thus, a group of 3 people will be responsible for spraying smoke and obstructing the enemy's vision, so that the combat squad can attack using spears and crossbows. Once the explanation is over, he states that no one should hesitate if they want to get out of there alive. Back to the present moment, the protagonist asks his allies to start going down. Sebian says they should also get out of there, but our boy says it's time to use their hands. The assistant manager questions why his colleagues are so useless until suddenly, the blue flag appears in front of him, and just as he prepares to grab it, he is attacked by Cheyenne, who immediately recognizes him and becomes even angrier. On the ninth floor, Guan says that, as expected, there are people eyeing the red flag. We see Kim Jung-pal from the blue team's elite unit preparing to punch the monster holding the item. Attacking, he says the impact is quite satisfying. The ex-soldier concludes that getting past those enemies is impossible, and that it's better to go back and inform Cheyenne about the situation. Dong arrives on the third floor and finds his men massacred. We discover that the blue team has gone from 89 members to 53. Perplexed, he wonders why no one there is from the red team and becomes furious at the fact that his allies couldn't tell friend from foe. Quickly, the man concludes that the enemy team never wanted to grab the blue flag, and after telling one of his men to shut up and grab the item, promises that he will make everyone regret it when he reaches the ninth floor. Kim Jung is happy to see that his team has recovered their flag, but unfortunately for him, Jin appears further ahead. The strong man asks if that would be the red team's sword woman, then ordering his allies to grab the sword and tie up the young woman. Without saying anything, the girl throws oil and a lighter toward the enemies. Starting a fire, she then begins to attack using her weapon. Even so, the men decide to charge again, and logically they end up worse off. Realizing they are not dealing with an ordinary woman, the remaining ones say that the only solution is to launch a drone attack. Seeing that the plan has gone wrong, the strong man wonders how this is possible, even with the enemy possessing such a fragile body, until it's his turn to dance with the sword. On the 8th floor, a guy asks the manager if those guarding the red flag are trustworthy. He says yes. However, a message appears warning that the red team has recovered their flag. The sprinklers are activated, but it seems not enough against the sea of fire. We found out that all teams have recovered their flags. This does not please the leader of the blue team at all. Shouting, he orders his allies to stop talking, and after getting what he wants, informs that the next stop is on the first floor. Elsewhere, Cheyenne's team celebrates the victory, except for the protagonist, who does not know how that happened. In his thoughts, he wonders if it was Jin who took the item. But he remembers that the king's game is back now. Upon opening the map, the young man sees members of the blue team approaching and shouting, asks his allies to run and grab the weapons. Ko watches all the chaos and smiling states that some people just need a little push to start moving, and that at any moment a king can fall. We are taken to the red team's base, where the leader of the blue team says he expected the enemies to be up to something. The others comment on how the place is frighteningly empty. Attacking one of his allies, the manager orders everyone to stop complaining and start breaking the base. Furious, a young man questions how the man can keep giving orders after just eliminating a friend. Approaching the guy with glasses, asks if he wants to die in place of the red team members and if he still hasn't realized that the enemies left the blue flag alone because they knew they were outnumbered. Therefore, they should not waste any more time, but rather break the entire base and eliminate the king afterward. Even agreeing, the young man states that when he gets out of there, he will kill Dong. Then, everyone starts trying to break things, but they realize that everything is so well tied that it won't be easy to destroy. Out of nowhere, a guy appears and attacks a blue team member's hand with a spear. We see that the red team was just waiting for the right moment to attack. On the other side, they try at all costs to keep the barricade standing. The manager orders his allies who are standing still to advance and attack, even if they are hit by spears. Our boy appears and takes down an enemy who was climbing, then shoots an arrow without hesitation. Shouting, he asks his team to prepare their weapons, but ends up being caught by an opponent. The man throws him hard to the ground and prepares to deliver a fatal blow. When questioned, Cheyenne says he is not the king, but the enemy claims he doesn't care. A guy from the red team notices the situation but ends up being killed. Thinking, the protagonist concludes that if the barricade falls, his team will have no more options. Shouting, the enemies announce that the barricade has been breached, starting a massacre. A girl finds her dead friend and panics, which draws the attention of the blue team men. Fortunately, Guan appears and prevents the worst from happening. The Lee brothers give their all to stay alive, and amid all the chaos, the leader wonders where Kang is, since his instincts tell him that if he defeats him, the red team will be finished. Shouting, he questions where the guy with a weapon is. Everyone remains silent until the protagonist appears, taking down the guy who knocked him down. Pointing his weapon, he says he is right there. Everyone is startled by the sound of the gunshot, including the manager, who orders his allies to grab the boy immediately and take advantage of the fact that he is the king and is injured. Our boy says he is not the king and begs them to believe his word. But the guy with glasses doesn't believe him and tells his friends that everyone is around the young man to protect him. With the enemies approaching, the protagonist concludes that it won't be possible to stop them even with the weapon, and states that he needs to find a way to kill Dawn once and for all. He starts shooting, but due to the distance and the other opponents, he misses the target. A guy appears ready to grab him. Cheyenne stops him with a bullet, but is hit in the leg by a knife. Even so, he returns to his plan to hit the leader. However, he ends up being hit by a guy who jumps and throws him to the ground. The blows cease when the ex-soldier appears and prevents the worst from happening, while wondering why innocent people have to kill each other. Happy, the blue team men announce that the king of the red team has fallen. We see our boy crawling in search of the weapon, but someone grabs the item first. It is Jayan, who hands the weapon to the young man and says that he needs to fight until the end. Remembering that the young woman is a former soldier, he stands up and asks for a favor, claiming next that if she gets the manager, the tide may turn. With a revolver in hand, the girl says she will try. Suddenly, someone pulls Kang back, and this time it's an enemy shouting. The man orders Lee not to shoot. The protagonist manages to headbutt him, and they both fall to the ground. Looking at his ally, he asks her to focus on the leader. She turns and says she will help him. With tears in his eyes, the guy from the blue team says that if the young man dies, he can survive. Shouting, our boy says that everyone there is in the same boat, including him. Thus, the young man grabs the knife that was lodged in his leg and tries to hit his opponent. The ex-soldier finally fires, but does not hit the guy with glasses. Dong realizes he is the target and panics, but the girl fires again. Everyone stops to look, and we see that the leader of the blue team has finally been hit. After he falls to the ground, the other men wonder what the hell happened. Joyeon turns her attention to Kang, but the manager shows that he is still alive. Looking ahead, he thinks to himself that in any case, he has already won the game. Then he orders his allies to finish off the blonde boy and says that if he can get out of there, he will take as many bullets as necessary. His party ends when Jin arrives and asks where the true king of the blue team is. Sometime later, Kang wonders where he is being taken. We discover along with him that everyone is on the 11th floor, where the old base of the blue team used to be. Looking to the side and seeing the Lee brothers, he asks what happened. Without answering, the young woman questions whether the boy is not hungry, since he was unconscious for almost 10 hours. Then she says that Jaehui appeared and destroyed the first floor, revealing to everyone that the manager was not the king of the blue team. Thus, when nothing happened even after Dong died, the girl got rid of the rest of the team, and they began to ascend to the 11th floor, until a message appeared announcing that the king of the blue team had died. After that, a locked room on that floor was found, and inside was the body of the true king, who was an elderly man and had been thrown there to die of hunger. Thinking, our boy remembers that indeed, if the manager were the king, he would know where he and his group would be. Claiming next that now there is only one team left, of which he knows nothing. It could even be that the enemies are hiding there among his allies. When asked about the young woman with the sword and the ex-soldier, Lee says that both went out for reconnaissance. We are taken to the first floor, where Guan asks if Jin has no respect for the dead. The administrator's henchmen appear and start setting fire to the corpses. After thinking for a moment, the boy asks if the young woman doesn't think those people deserve better treatment, but she says he is talking too much for someone with hands dirty from strawberry juice. The young man wonders if, should he continue the game, he will become someone like her. In the cinema, Cheyenne thinks that if anyone there is from the black team, in the worst case scenario, they will have to execute one by one, and since there is no more time to waste, he states that it is time to conduct a test. He remembers when the flags were taken and that the only ones who were not on the first floor were Jaehoe and Jaeon. Suddenly, Sibian says that when the young man fainted, the ex-soldier kept asking for the revolver. Our boy asks if the guy said that to aim at Guan. Without confirming or denying, the young man states that that is all he has to say. Elsewhere, the guy with black hair is relieved to still have food and, looking at the sword star, prepares to reveal something, while the Lee brothers argue about the fact that Kang is suspicious of everyone. Jin hears something, but tells the ex-soldier that it's better for them to go inside. On the inside, the protagonist notices the presence of the duo. Then he decides to talk to the young woman outside. She says there is a good chance that Jaeyoung is the king of the black team because besides asking for the weapon, he had plenty of time to wander around. Our boy says that this last part also applies to her, who showed up at the last minute on the first floor. The ex-soldier interrupts the conversation and, stating that he was looking for Cheyenne, asks if he accepts a cigarette. Everyone goes inside the cinema and Jin shows concern about leaving the boy alone with Guan. Kang declines the cigarette offer a second time. Lighting one up, the young man says he only started smoking again to stay in control. By chance, he found a pack in the coat of a dying child. The problem is that everything seemed natural to him. Grabbing the gun, the protagonist asks what the young man's point is. Throwing away the cigarette, he says he can't take it anymore, so he will reveal at once that he is the king of the black team. Even with his hand held, our boy manages to fire. However, he ends up being taken hostage, and everyone goes on high alert. Shouting, Gaiyong orders that no one advance if they want the boy to stay alive. He then reveals that he needed to survive for 6 days, and in 10 minutes he will be the winner. Cheyenne asks why he is doing this when he could have just stood still and walked out alive. The young man agrees and says that when he was a soldier, he went through even more extreme situations but never gave up, because he considered his missions noble. But then the king's game began, and Ka said that having a third team was natural to raise the stakes before disappearing. Starting his personal hell, we discover that he planned to die at the right moment. But then when the blue flag was recovered, everything changed, and as if in a trance, the young man retrieved his flag. For the first time, he realized he wanted to live. However, surviving in place of Kang haunted him, and even if he tried to save as many people as he could, our boy seemed to have been born for that game. Thus, the ex-soldier concluded that he no longer had anyone he could count on. Hearing all the commotion, Jaehui slowly begins to grab her sword. However, the king of the black team bids farewell to everyone and says he will leave the hell before shooting himself. With his face smeared with strawberry juice, the protagonist states that in the end, Guan was the true winner. Interrupting the moment of shock, Ko appears and says that for a moment she thought the red team would lose. Then she congratulates everyone for passing the first round and setting up the feast. She states that they can feel free to eat. Quickly, people begin to indulge. Without touching anything, Kang says he would like to leave. The admin asks what the rush is and says there is still time for a meeting, since they need to prepare before seeing what happened to the outside world. She reveals that the second round will bring incredible enemies, and all the group needs to do to win is follow the rules. A flash appears, almost blinding everyone. We see that protrusions begin to appear on the skin of those who are eating, until suddenly, they explode for trying to take food outside. Cheyenne opens his eyes again and realizes he is no longer in the building. We discover that out of a total of 8 billion people, about 2 billion survived the first challenge, and now the second round will have the theme winter, something that if Ka had mentioned, no one would have noticed. Saying that the situation changes when human comfort is taken away, the admin states that they will have to coexist with various creatures, and surviving in that frozen city is the goal. She then reveals that the artifacts will be activated, but only those who are chosen will receive gifts, which range from Class A to F. Thus, the selected players will receive their items the following week, except for Cheyenne, who will have to wait just a little longer to activate his artifact. The woman disappears, and an explosion caused by a creature that looks like a whale occurs. After some time walking, we see Julian saying goodbye to the protagonist and Jin. Since her home and brother are in Seoul, everyone heads off in different directions, bringing an end to the teen phase. A sword star comments that walking the streets is not safe, so after finding Junho, they should look for a place to stay. It is revealed that in this round there are guilds that usually control the streets. Therefore, avoiding them increases the chances of survival. Suddenly, a green thing tries to attack Kang, but she is stopped by the young woman. Explaining, she says that it is the snow nepens, which attacks when the target approaches, and they tend to react to shiny objects like zippers, which means the young man should try to stay alert, even if he is very worried. Our boy can only think about his brother and says they need to hurry. A little further ahead, the duo encounters Tuntum, which normally does not attack humans first. After a confrontation, they finally arrive. Cheyenne decides to enter alone, and amid the chaos that is the building, he thinks that he can't imagine how. The little one is just being a child sweating cold. He inserts the key into the door, but to his surprise, it was already open. Inside, he finds two people who seem to know him. It's about his aunt and his cousin Yaong. Furious, our boy slams the door, and he wonders where Junho is. When grabbed, the woman says she will prepare something for him to eat, revealing next that the little one was with them until he left, saying he was going to look for his older brother 3 days ago. Shouting, the protagonist asks why she didn't stop him, and his aunt says she tried. The boy's cousin joins the conversation and says that since there isn't enough food for everyone, children are useless. We find out that after the boy's parents passed away, the woman took them in just to steal the insurance money. Remembering this, Kang says that the least she could have done was prevent a child from leaving the apartment. Then he remembers Guan, who called the Hell League, and concludes that he is only alive because he grew up in hell, so if being ruthless is what needs to be done, he will willingly follow that path, even if it means becoming the devil. Jin waits patiently outside while checking how many cigarettes he has left. Our boy approaches and sits next to her. Shaking, he says that if the young woman's purpose is to end the league or his life, he will do whatever she commands. But in return, he needs her to help him find his little brother. The sword star promises that she will help him. After that, they walk through the city, and after a while, the young woman comments that there are barriers surrounding the players, which means Junho hasn't gone far. The protagonist remembers the guilds and says that if his brother is alive, he must have tried to reach a safe place. So they should start by checking the police stations and district departments. The duo heads to the Manhwa police station, hoping to find any clues about the little one. Suddenly, several Nepenthas emerge from the snow, but they are quickly eliminated by Jin. Cheyenne notices that the streets near the police station have been cleared, indicating that there are people there. The young woman asserts that they should not let their guard down since they don't know what kind of guild has taken over that area. A little further ahead, several people appear, including Xianjun Li, surgeon of the Manhwa police station. The young man and the girl are taken to the police building and manage to enter even while carrying weapons, thanks to the surgeon, who reveals that he has something in mind. Inside, he says that 3 floors are designated for the injured, but they have already reached maximum capacity, and they have few sources of water and food. The problem is that dozens of people arrive every day. Thus, they have been sending patrol teams to gather supplies, but casualties from the monsters have been increasing. Then the man shows where the duo will stay and hands them passes that can be used to use the bathroom and receive food, which must be used only once a day as the plumbing system in the bathroom is no longer functioning and there isn't enough water. Our boy says it's fine, and the officer leaves, wishing the two good luck. They begin the search for Junho, and in the midst of this process, they realize how order does not exist in that place. Since where the police were not present, violence ran rampant. After a few hours without success, Kang tries to stay optimistic. Some police officers pass by, commenting on how exhausted they are from all of this. Jin appears with food and says she hasn't seen any sign of the little one, then asking if they will leave the next day. Denying, the protagonist says he wants to stay a bit longer and fulfill the mission that appeared earlier, because if the police station becomes a more habitable place, he will earn achievement points. The young woman says that these points are granted to monarchs and that these missions usually only appear in the final stages of the league. Even finding it strange, our boy says that sooner or later he will need the points anyway, so he will do whatever it takes, even though he isn't a monarch yet. Then he states that it's better to stay there and use the available information than to go out and risk losing Juno for good. Besides, it will only be a matter of time before they meet the monarch of the place. On the second day, Cheonja notices that the snow is heavier and says they need to find a way to get more food soon. A police officer says that the scout team has gathered outside, but the numbers remain low. Suddenly, the protagonist and the sword girl appear and ask if they can volunteer. We are taken to the night before when Siam is training outside with her ally. After defeating him once again, the young woman says she planned to train him before the artifact manifested. But he doesn't understand why he wanted to learn to fight in the middle of the night, explaining the young man says it's because the next day they will become volunteers to help bring in more food and prove their worth, so they can be worthy of speaking with the monarch. But for that, he needs to be able to save his own skin. Excited, the girl says she likes the young man's spirit, and so they return to training. Back in the present moment, we see one of the volunteers asking if it will ever stop snowing. Caught by surprise, snakes emerge from the snow, but Jin quickly makes the environment safe again. Our boy approaches and asks the man to remove the zippers from his clothing to attract less attention. Thinking, the surgeon says that thanks to the duo, it will be possible to venture a little further from the station in search of food. Then he announces that that day everyone will head to the first street of Anyang, which is in an area crowded with food and clothing. The problem is that several guilds have fought for control of the place. This attracted the monsters, making the street an impenetrable location. Quickly, the group manages to enter and begins to clean out everything they see in front of them, including expired meal kits, smiling. Lee tells Kang that he had hopes for him and his friend, but it seems the two have worked magic. Our boy says he is happy to help and can hardly imagine what the police have been going through lately. Because of this search, there has been an improvement in the food supply, and even if small, it was enough to lift the spirits of everyone who was in need, to the point that more people wanted to become volunteers. Moreover, since the duo joined the group, there have been no more casualties. During another search, the surgeon suggests they stop by one more place to take advantage of the amount of manpower. Everyone heads to the Short Ribs restaurant, which, although not too messy, has some bodies scattered on the floor. A guy shouts that he found some meat. Looking at the corpses, our boy concludes that whoever did that was not human, but rather a creature with many teeth. Jin reveals that he has seen that before, while the other volunteers celebrate the amount of fresh meat they found. Suddenly, a monster that seems to emerge from the wall appears. The people start screaming and running, but the sword girl orders everyone to stay still. The creature becomes invisible again and disappears, and the young woman asserts that anyone who wants to stay alive must remain still, as the floor of the place could very well be the monster's tongue. A woman asks what that means, explaining Jaehui says that it is a crocodile turtle that lurks with its mouth open, waiting for someone to step on its tongue. Due to its camouflage ability, it is difficult to know where it is, and no matter how small the object is or how large, including the walls and the ceiling. Furthermore, the creature has a lot of patience and can stay in the same spot for centuries until it catches prey, which means they are in the middle of a minefield. Jeonjun says that in this case he will serve as bait since he was the one who led them to that place. Kang says he is against it and reminds them of the corpses that were scattered, which shows that there is not just one enemy inside. He starts fiddling with his jacket and states that no one there needs to serve as bait. They just need to make a fabric rope with something solid tied to the end, mimicking a fishing rod, so they can reach the exit. We find out that the mission took longer than expected and that it took an hour just to gather everyone in one place. After 3 hours, the group managed to take only 10 steps and fatigue began to set in, along with the cold due to a broken window. Suddenly, a volunteer falls to the ground and is caught by one of the turtles. Thinking, the protagonist says they still have about 6 meters to go, which means they will have to continue for a few more hours. The problem is that the cold will increase and there is nothing there that can be used as bait. Jin approaches and asks to try even without the artifact's abilities. Seeing the young woman draw her sword, our boy says that actually he had an idea. He takes all the zippers he had saved and asks if the snow nepenthes can reach the 4th floor. The girl says yes. Excited, the young man says that when she breaks the window, he needs her to throw the objects. Then Shigen asks everyone to stay in their positions, and using his fabric thread, he breaks the glass while praying for his idea to work. The green creatures quickly appear and reveal a turtle near the window. Followed by a few others, with a clear passage, the protagonist orders everyone to jump, since even being on the 4th floor, the snow should cushion the fall. Jin realizes that the young man will be caught by the green creatures and quickly saves him, in addition to falling with him in his lap. The surgeon says that everyone got out alive thanks to the young man. Looking at the Nepens, the protagonist says it's better for them to go back while they are distracted. From the top of the building, 2 people observe the group. One of them asks if the queen wouldn't be interested in the blonde boy who jumped first. Then the duo tells the leader that they found a decent guy walking with the Manhack police. Sueun Lee, the leader of the first Donghat Guild search group, says she will report to the queen. The guild returns to the base, which is located in the Anyang City Hall, and we see that they usually take prisoners. Inside, a woman is anxious to see how many female prisoners her team has brought, claiming then that she needs a man good enough for her lovely little bird, referring to a young girl trapped inside a glass box. We find out that the short-haired woman is named Jisoo Park, and she is the monarch of the guild. The leader of the search group enters the room and says he has been keeping an eye on some manhack police officers who are snooping around the first street of Anyang, but before they could attack them, he noticed that the ones in charge were a boy and a girl who had above-average skills. Upon hearing that the young man was handsome, the monarch smiles and says that in that case they need to show how things work there. Therefore, the boy must kill all the captured police officers and send their bodies back to the precinct. The prisoners in the room panic and one of them starts crying while begging for his life. Jisoo says that this is nothing personal, but he would die anyway because he called her by name. The police officer begs for the queen's forgiveness, but is quickly dispatched. Holding Lee Sebian's face, the woman says that a world where only power is enough to bring anyone to their knees is a very beautiful world. The young man asks what she did with his sister, and the monarch simply says that the young girl must have been put to work somewhere. However, if he is obedient, he will be able to see her. Jisoo climbs onto the bed and calls for Sebium. Knowing that the penalty for disobedience is death, the young man stands up. With her arms around his body, the woman tells Suun to send back the heads of the manhack police. We are taken back to the precinct, where two police officers are happy to see the scout team returning without any injuries. A man approaches and asks the sergeant what they brought back. Remembering everything Cheyenne did to keep them alive, Chinongjin questions whether he would like to meet the police chief. Sometime later, we see them climbing a staircase. Thinking, the protagonist says he didn't think he would get to meet the police chief so quickly. Quickly, the duo arrives at the office. Inside, a man comments that although there are other unknown guilds in Anyang, if they contact headquarters, the groups will not be a danger. This is Jeonwoo Park, the precinct chief. Inho Gil, a congressman from Anyang, asks if he will take responsibility if things go wrong, then stating that it doesn't matter that the survivors are complaining. Restricting activities is the best policy. The monarch of the first Manhack Guild says that if he uses his edict, the chief of the barracks might find out. Interrupting the conversation, the sergeant knocks on the door and enters the room. The congressman tells the chief that putting citizens to work is out of the question. After some more discussion, Lee finally manages to introduce the protagonist and states that he is part of the scout team and has been a great help. Thinking, Cheyenne concludes that the higher-ups need someone to take responsibility when things go wrong, and offers to be a civil administrator. The congressman asks how old the young man is. Our boy says he is 20, and that he dropped out of high school to work in construction. Inho says that to be an administrator, he needs many skills, such as accounting and logistics. Therefore, it would be better for the boy to continue doing what he does best. The sergeant tries to reverse the situation, but is told to be quiet. When asked what he would do if he were put in power, the protagonist thinks for a moment and, without answering, asks what the reason is for neglecting civilians while only using police force. Jeonwoo says this is done to keep the situation under control, while the old man says the young man won't be able to understand. Even after hearing an explanation, Kang concludes that he is right and that those men still believe the world will return to normal. And when that happens, they don't want to be blamed for anything. Thus, he says that waiting for an official response from the government is the most sensible thing to do. However, there isn't much time left and soon food will run out in all cities, which means it doesn't matter if they preserve their own image, as sooner or later, everyone will die of hunger. Our boy asserts that he will prove his worth to gain the trust of both, and in response to the first question, he says he will take full responsibility in place of the police. Lee says the young man doesn't need to go that far, but it seems to be too late, for he tells the congressman that he will do his best to save everyone, provided he receives authorization. The two men laugh and accept the offer, while commenting on how brave the young man is and that he deserves to be appointed. The monarch quickly takes care of this and Kang officially becomes an administrator. Thinking, he says that if he can become a monarch, finding Juno will just be a matter of time. Inho says he has no doubt the boy will do well, so he would like to ask him to find a way to end the cold. Our boy says he will do that. Later, Jin says that now he should be able to use the artifact. The protagonist activates it and discovers that he now owns the sphere, which has the ability of transportation. Several purple orbs appear, and the young woman says he should think of them as energy balls. That move according to his thoughts, but to evolve the item, the boy will need to train it. We find out that an artifact requires two main abilities, the first being imagination, and the second, mental resistance, which defines how long the user can maintain the artifact. This is the reason why the girl also cannot use her ability for long. In a matter of seconds, Chan learns how to do it, just like in his past life. Jaehui says that in this case, they should discuss the things he gained as an administrator, which includes a secretary, Sugaon Kim, who enters the room bringing the list of technicians the protagonist requested. Kang asks the boy to gather everyone on the first floor to start building a boiler, which will serve to end the cold. On the first floor, the protagonist makes a call. Upon hearing his name, Jongkyul introduces himself and asks what the meeting is about. The secretary asks the man to step aside as the administrator will explain everything later. Thinking, the technician concludes that the young man must just be another one seeking power. After identifying all the men, our boy says that from that day on, they will start building a boiler. For this reason, he also grouped them by specialty. Jong-hyul asks if the boy really thinks there is enough gas or electricity to do that, and claims that even if there were, there aren't many radiators installed in the precinct, which makes it impossible to heat the entire space. Kang says the focus is not to heat the entire precinct, just the residential floors, all without needing to break concrete, since his plan is to use the pipes from the neighboring buildings and install the boiler above ground. The technician says that even so, it would be necessary to heat water and pump it through the system, and for that, electrical energy is needed. The protagonist asserts that there are enough people to melt the snow and channel the water through the pipes, and even if it requires hundreds of people, they need to give their best if they don't want to freeze to death. The man concludes that the plan is not entirely impossible, as it just requires regulating the steam correctly. Continuing, Cyan says he will only be able to do that with the help of all the technicians. For this reason, he would like to ask them to assist him. The secretary says the boy doesn't need to ask for anything, just give orders. We find out that the technicians had a similar idea some time ago, but the police chief blocked it. Because of this, the men decide to help even if it is a complicated construction. Reflecting, the protagonist says that if they can make a boiler system, they can do much more. Kim says what the boy did was incredible. Turning around, he asks if there are prisoners in the precinct. To help with the labor, the secretary says yes, and quickly the duo arrives at the basement, where the cells are located. The prisoners start shouting, begging to be released. With a flashlight, Cheyenne tries to find someone useful, until suddenly, Myongjin Choi, former vice leader of the Black Dragon Guild, tells him to get out of there if he doesn't intend to free them. It is revealed that the man is in prison for aggravated assault and has a history of 8 prior convictions. The protagonist approaches and asks if the criminal trusts his own strength. Laughing, the man grabs him through the bars and asks why he wants to know that. Thinking, our boy concludes that the man is indeed very strong and states aloud that he will let him out as long as he agrees to cooperate. We see that his plan is to form a group of fighters who are not afraid to face monsters and enemies. Stein tells the secretary that he will take responsibility for supervising the inmates. Troy says that apparently the authority has gone to the boy's head and refuses to help. Unbothered, the protagonist says he knows someone stronger than him and asks if the man has no reason to stay there, since he could have killed him but didn't and seems quite stable mentally. As he leaves, the young man says he has until the next day to decide. Kim asks why his boss chose that man among so many people. Our boy tells the young man not to worry, as he has a safety measure, and reveals that he recruited the criminal because he feels he will need much more strength from that moment on. The next day, Kang asks for the number of scouts to be increased. While visiting the floors, he thinks about cases of people who died from freezing and concludes that he doesn't have much time, as the temperature drops a little more each day, causing the comfort level of civilians to decrease by 1%. Handing a paper to the secretary, the young man asks him to make a list of everyone who can work, regardless of age or gender, and deliver it the next day. We return to the monarch's office, where the deputy questions what the young man is doing there, if he already has full authority, even over the inmates. The protagonist reveals his plan to make a boiler and says it is necessary to restrict public access to certain areas to reduce the risks of damage during construction, so he will need help to relocate an entire floor. Smiling, Inho states that since the young man has taken responsibility for everything, he has permission to use the police force to get the job done. Before leaving the room, the protagonist thinks about how absurd it is for the men to be sitting there drinking without doing anything. The next day, Kim shows the data he obtained and says there are 410 people who can serve as labor. The protagonist turns and asks Jong-hyul if that number is enough. Smiling, he says it is more than enough. The secretary feels relieved to finally be able to rest, but our boy tells him to create a table with all 856 civilians and track their status by date and by work categories, since the workers need to be compensated. Without waiting for a response from the young man, the protagonist says he is counting on him. Outside, Cheyenne informs everyone about the boiler construction plan and states that it will be necessary to find the required materials. A man asks why they should listen to him if the police said they would take care of everything, starting a round of complaints. Kang says that doing this is necessary to keep them alive, and grabbing the bottle of soju he stole from the office. He says that the freezing point of the drink is 0 degrees, which means the bottle will be frozen in just 2 weeks. That will be when they can go to sleep and never wake up again, so he needs all available labor. The protagonist reveals that he wants to stay alive for his little brother and states that he knows everyone there must have some reason to live. His words end up convincing the crowd, and the technicians begin to gather people to start the search. Thinking, Jin says that the boy is starting to look a bit like his past self. We find out that from that day on, the groups walked around the city looking for pipes, while other teams, led by the technicians, began to build the boiler. A week passes, and Jong-hyul concludes that in 7 days, everything will be ready. Suddenly, a message appears announcing that the cold status has been raised to level 2. Ka appears on the screen and announces that the current temperature is 4 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, with a wind chill of -30, so everyone must be careful not to catch a cold, and remember that hugs keep people warmer. One of the volunteers says it's better for them to end the day and go back to avoid freezing to death. We see that a child can no longer hold on, and other people begin to fall. Kim tells the protagonist that up to that moment, they have had 37 casualties and 272 civilians are in critical condition. Thinking, the young man concludes that at this rate, everyone will be dead before the boiler is finished. Thus, he asks his secretary to put the elderly and children to work as they need all the manpower available. However, instead of assigning heavy tasks, the young man should have these people boil water and distribute bottles to the workers to help maintain their body temperature. Additionally, it will be necessary to build caves in the snow and light fires so that the workers outside can warm up every hour. We see that Jin is the one who takes on this part of the job. Cheyenne asks the technician if it is possible to finish building the boiler in 3 days. The technician says he will see what he can do and states that it may be possible if the assembly process is simplified. Choi appears and wonders why a boy is the administrator. It is revealed that a few days ago, our boy visited him in his cell to find out what the answer was. To get out of that cubicle, the man agreed to cooperate as long as he receives a pack of cigarettes per day. Thus, they both made a deal, but if the inmate steps out of line, he will immediately return to jail. 3 days later, the workers connect the pipes to the water tank. Thinking, the protagonist says that everyone has done what they could, but if it doesn't work, everything will be over. The time comes to light the boiler and he asks that all the firewood that was found be used. Jong-kil lights the lighter and begins the process. We discover that 4 days ago, the man's wife died frozen, and the day before yesterday, his grandson also passed away. Just the day before, his son and wife left the station and he decided to stay, thinking it was better to die there than to stop them. Amid these sad memories, the technician begins to feel the heat in his hands and everyone starts to celebrate the fact that the construction has succeeded. The deputy and the monarch are pleased with the progress. Thinking, Choi wonders if he will now have to work for real. When asked, the protagonist concludes that the only thing left is to solve the food problem. This means that a different approach will need to be adopted. He announces that the next stop is at Anyang Station. We are taken to the location, where a colossal monster leaves corpses scattered everywhere. Sometime later, Inho comments that the protagonist is truly a blessing for having built the boiler and put the civilians to work. Opening a drink, Park says he used to wonder why an apocalypse had to happen during his term, but now he sees no problem in it or in leaving everything in the boy's hands. We return to see our boy explaining why he wants to go to Anyang Station. According to him, as it is becoming increasingly difficult to find food near the station and sending volunteers has its limits, his plan is to raise the monsters like cattle. The people do not like the idea and Kim prepares to show data, but a guy claims that there is a giant monster at the station and it is not safe to go there. The protagonist says that, in fact, this is even better, as a large creature would feed hundreds of people. When asked what they will do if they encounter enemies along the way, the young man asks them to just trust him. Outside, Cheongjun warns that it will take some time to clear the roads, but he quickly discovers that Cyan has other plans which consist of traveling over the buildings. A woman asks Choi for help, but he says he is not anyone's babysitter, while thinking that he is only there because he wanted to leave but ended up becoming a pack mule. Not seeing any monsters, the man reflects on whether it would be a good idea to take the supplies when everyone is asleep and leave, since in the midst of an apocalypse, it is natural for guys like him to take charge. We discover that his goal is to find the leader of his old gang and reunite the group again. When the bandit's eyes spot the monster at the station, he decides to put his plans on hold. People begin to panic, but quickly understand that they need to be quiet. Jin says that with that horrible hearing, the monster can only be an ogre. Kang smiles and says that the creature is perfect, but not as food, rather as a weapon, since they need armed forces to prevent possible attacks from other guilds, before the first round of the siege repeats itself, especially since they do not know how many or what kind of artifact users are out there. Thinking, he concludes that he needs to know everything there is to know about ogres. A few days later, our boy continues his investigation, and he says that the 4 ogres he identified up to that moment always return to the station at night, which means there must be something in the basement. He warns the Sword Star that he will take a closer look at the creatures. Choi appears and shouting says it's not a good idea. Refusing to accompany the duo in the exploration, he excuses himself by saying he doesn't want to fall into a deadly trap. When asked if the young man only let him out because he wanted a pack mule, he receives the answer that it was indeed the case. The protagonist also mentions that he knows the man will flee at the first sign of trouble. Therefore, he will only warn him once that if he wants to stay in the guild, he must follow his orders. The duo walks away and ignores the bandit's request to wait. Upon reaching the entrance of the hole, Jin asks what his ally wants with Myeongjun. Our boy says he is testing the man's temperament because he needs someone who will do everything he asks. Then he asks if the girl is sure that ogres do not wake up at night. She replies that yes, and that the creatures only wake up with the sunlight. And so without further ado, the two enter the enemy's lair. After a while, Shine hears a noise and says it seems to be coming from the basement. With a lantern in hand, they decide to follow the sound. On the way, the protagonist notices how the ceiling is cracked due to the entrance and exit of the monsters, and they wonder why they want to stay in such a cramped place. Suddenly, he spots something, and shining the lantern on it, discovers a pile of bodies that are part of the creature's food stock. Getting a little closer, the young man realizes that more skeletons are appearing. This can only mean that the enemies are very close. The young girl says that he could attack the monsters and still, they wouldn't wake up. Trusting this, our boy starts to climb on one of the ogre's bodies, and upon reaching higher up, says that, as expected, there is more than one. Jin asks his ally to be careful around the creature's eye region. Looking at the clock, the protagonist concludes that he has until 3 in the morning to figure out how to tame the beasts. After a few minutes, we see him testing the enemy's skin resistance and discovering that they have regeneration abilities and do not seem to feel pain. Observing the boy from a distance, the young girl remembers that in her past life, no one thought of domesticating ogres, and she wonders if her return changed anything in the events. Suddenly, a loud noise occurs and the duo tries to understand what is happening, while paying attention to whether the monsters continue sleeping. Our boy says he is starting to think it's not worth turning the creatures into weapons. Suddenly, a screw comes loose from the ceiling and something makes the boy lose his balance and fall. On the ground, he questions what happened, and when he looks ahead, he sees Yahello cutting the hand of an ogre that was about to hit him. In the midst of the battle, the young girl ends up getting hit and her sword breaks. We see that her arm has broken into several pieces, since her body is still that of an ordinary human. When she falls, the protagonist screams and quickly discovers that the creature did not wake up, it just changed position during its sleep. Even so, he concludes that it was too quick for a simple turn and decides it's time to leave. The problem is that his friend fell right in the middle of the enemies. Cheyenne starts to feel guilty and with trembling hands declares that he will save the young girl no matter what. After calming down, he manages to grab Jin and begins the climb to get back outside, praying to accomplish all this before the sun rises. With no other option, the young man uses his knife as a climbing tool, but sometime later he ends up falling along with the girl. The sun begins to rise and Kang wonders if it would be a good idea to hide among the other corpses. However, it is too late as an ogre opens its eye. Rising up, the creature smiles, while the protagonist mentally apologizes to Chuno for not being able to find him. To our boy's luck, Yahello wakes up and prevents the monster's attack. The young man calls her and asks how that is possible, then discovering that his ally has a skill called Guardian Angel, which serves solely to protect him. Thinking, he questions whether this is why she can move even while unconscious and what it means that he is the beneficiary. Putting everything aside, the protagonist says he has no choice but to take the risk. Thus, he orders the young woman to protect him from the ogres. Obeying, she picks him up and simply starts to fly. Outside, the protagonist shouts that it's enough and that they need to return to the station. A message appears notifying that the Guardian Angel's body has reached its limit and that sleep mode will be initiated for physical regeneration. With that, the dude begins to fall. Sometime later, the young man wakes up and wonders where he is, quickly realizing that this place is the infirmary of the station. A woman approaches with a bottle of water and says that he was brought along with Jin by Choi, who ran to the station as soon as he saw a big flash of light. Our boy discovers that he was out for an entire day, but that in the end both he and the girl will be fine. He remembers the Guardian Angel's ability and questions what kind of monarch he was in his past life, to force someone to protect him even while unconscious. Upon leaving the room, the young man comes face to face with several civilians happy about his recovery, revealing next that they were very worried when they saw him plummeting from the sky. The protagonist awkwardly thanks them, as he is not used to that kind of attention. Kim appears and, apologizing for the interruption, states that his boss needs to see something. Outside, a creature carries on its horns what remains of other police officers who have disappeared. Furious, Shinwoo says that this is a declaration of war and an attack on justice itself. While trembling, he holds a note sent by Jisoo, which says that this is a gift for all hard work of the police. Thinking, Science says that apparently the group managed to tame a monster, which means they know what they are doing, and that they are preparing to defeat other guilds. Turning around, he asks the secretary to call a meeting with the chief as soon as possible. Shouting, the monarch orders his men to create a task force to arrest the scum of Donghak. Our boy approaches and says that the man should not give in to the enemy's provocations. But before he could explain anything further, he is interrupted by the chief, who tells him to shut up and follow orders. Yellen Park asserts that he will not let those bandits go unpunished, even if the world has turned into hell. The protagonist concludes that the man is more foolish than he thought. Elsewhere, we see two people excited to find smoke coming from a chimney. Watching everything from above the station, Kang thinks that the enemy guild must have many artifact users, which means that a single wrong move could kill everyone. Choi approaches and asks what the young man wants him to do, revealing next that going out alone is not an easy task and that he decided to accept the deal he proposed some time ago. The protagonist says he needs someone to do what he says without asking questions. Smiling, the thug says he just needs a chance to show how good an employee he is. Our boy likes being called boss and says he will give him a mission soon. We are taken to the territory of the second guild of Ogai, where Jisoo says that this leaf thing is very beautiful as it allows her to do whatever she wants in the name of freedom. Next, the woman states that she will kill anyone who tries to stop her and reveals that after taking over Ojai, she will go after the Manhwa station. A few days later, civilians wonder why the call is taking so long. Park appears and, shouting, says he has an announcement to make. He reveals to everyone what happened and says it is necessary to respond to the scoundrels of Donghak and kind. However, the officers are overwhelmed and there is a limit to what they can do. Therefore, his idea is to create a police force made up of civilians. An old man who is very cold falls to the ground and his granddaughter tries to help him, but is stopped by an officer, who says that no one can enter until the chief finishes speaking. Still shouting, the monarch asks people to join him to show the strength of the Korean people. No one likes what they hear. Thinking, the man wonders why no one is stepping forward, even with him providing food and shelter. Claiming that there is no choice, Jeonwoo issues a decree that forces everyone to help him with his plan, and says that anyone who does not obey will be sent to prison. Amid the chaos, Kang concludes that the monarch will not be able to attack Donghak immediately. Approaching, Jongkyul says he would like to know why the police chief went crazy all of a sudden, and asks if there is no way to talk to the enemies instead of starting a war. When asked if he would like to become the monarch, the protagonist says no, and that it is better to just have faith in the chief, since he must have his reasons. The next day, we see civilians complaining about having to train in the cold. Still throwing a tantrum, Park says that war training is no joke, and that starting that day, the civil police force will join the scout teams. Thinking, Cheongtran says he is not sure that this will work and concludes that something written in the letter must have driven the chief crazy. Remembering Jisoo's name, he says that the two must have fought and now everyone will pay the price. Fortunately, Cheyenne seems to have a plan that involves building a bridge so that everyone can reach any station safely. In the office, Inho asks if starting a war is not too much and asserts that the monarch should have at least warned him before involving unprepared civilians. The man does not seem to be listening to the old man as he is focused on the woman serving drinks. Smiling, he says he had to bring help and asks the young woman to fill his glass. The deputy says they can request a special forces unit to formalize the operation. However, Jeonwoo asks if he still does not understand that the world is ending and asserts that he only let him act as a leader so that if the world returns to normal, which is not going to happen, using his privileges as a monarch is the best solution. Lighting a cigarette, the police chief thinks about the conversation he had with Cheyenne. We find out that the young man revealed he is looking for a way to tame the ogres living at the station, so they can use the creatures as weapons of war. Upon hearing that more people are needed to do the task, the man says he will provide as many people as the boy wants. Back in the present moment, he states that having someone so young working hard is amazing. Therefore, from that moment on, the deputy will also have to prove his worth. In the infirmary, Jae-hoo finally wakes up and is irritated for having been defeated by an ogre. Thinking, she wonders what happened after she left the den with Kang, and after finding the young man, questions the reason for the training. Our boy says he thought of a new plan and asks her to close the door, since he will talk about things that are not part of the mission. After the conversation, he goes to check on the progress of the bridge and if there is anything he can do to help. A young man says that since the chief formed the civil police force, the workforce has decreased. Smiling, the protagonist states that he will resolve this situation. We go back to the past and discover that his plan is to remove the monarch from power and find Juno before the war actually begins. Jin agrees to participate in the plan and asks what the next steps are. Explaining, our boy says they cannot get rid of Park immediately, since the man has a lot of authority over the survivors of the first round. Thus, it will be necessary to destroy people's faith in him and show that no one is safe under his command. Meanwhile, the young man will build his own influence to gradually unite the disgruntled citizens. We find out that this last part will be done by Choi. Meanwhile, the Sword Star will protect the protagonist and help him with the ogre training. So when they have enough support, they will go on strike. But until then, the chief must not suspect anything. Back in the present, Jae-woo thinks about how impressive it is that the boy is always thinking ahead. In the office, Kang explains to Jeonwoo why he needs more manpower, under the pretense that the construction of the route to the station will be faster, as will the ogre training. Laughing, the man says the boy is brilliant and that he will give him what he asked for. Inho enters the room, interrupting the conversation. Thinking, the protagonist says he finally discovered what happened to the deputy. As he passes by the old man, he asks if the young man will treat him as if he were invisible. Cyan greets the deputy, but the monarch says the boy does not need to worry about that. Angrily, Jill comments that he never thought he would be disregarded like this and orders the young woman present to serve him a drink. Then he asks what the story is about training ogres. Without answering, the monarch says he should worry about proving he is useful. Standing up, the old man says he understands, but that he will never forget that humiliation. Thinking, the policeman wonders why his former ally still thinks he has any power, and concludes that it is time to expel him. He turns his attention to Jason and asks if the young woman is feeling lonely. She says no, but the man orders her to stay and chat, which will certainly not be pleasant. We see the construction of the bridge again, which has accelerated since more workers got involved. A young man says they will reach Anyang Station in about 4 days. We learn that Cheyenne plans to divide the people into 2 teams when everything is ready. Since the police will likely not join the ogre group, he will use the training as a facade to organize the coup. But for that, it will be necessary to have trustworthy people. That same night, the protagonist revealed to Jin that ogres respond to sounds and vibrations. Once on the day they went to explore the lair, the creatures only moved after a very loud noise occurred. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. It is Jongcheol, who, worried, says the young man needs to see something. As he goes to another place, our boy encounters the woman who was in the monarch's office. Injured after being assaulted by the man, the technician says she refuses to reveal the culprit. However, he knows there is only one person capable of doing that. Upon hearing that Jason is not the only victim, the protagonist says that the blame for this is his for hesitating. And turning around, he states that he will need the help of everyone present to put his plan into action. A few more days pass, and finally the construction of the bridges is completed. We are taken to Anyang Station, where two men are running desperately. We see that the ogre is right behind the duo. Determined, the two only stop running when they cross a marking made by a red cloth. Turning around, they realize that the creature has indeed stopped seeing them and wonder how on earth Kang discovered that. It is revealed that the young man found out that the monsters are extremely territorial and decided to mark with tape the places where they have never been seen. From the top of a building, Java prepares to scare the enemies. Thinking as she prepares to attack, she says she needs to work hard to return to full strength as quickly as possible. Once she gets hurt again, her ally will be in danger. Next, we discover that ogres attack anyone who invades their territory. For within their domain, there is a hierarchy centered on the strongest. After an intense battle, the young woman emerges victorious and says she only hit the nerves to cause a lot of pain as planned. Sidon carries a bucket full of glass shards and says he will wait for the enemy to fall asleep to place the items on their body. Thus, when the sun rises, the shards will shine and the Nerpentes will do the rest of the work. So he can finally check if his theory that ogres are attracted to certain sounds is correct. The Sword Star agrees with everything but states that she will stay close to hit the monster if necessary, since she's now the alpha. Later, the duo discovers that the creatures get scared very easily. We see Choi, who now commands a special force made up of 50 people, telling his men that it is time to start working. At the police station, Park shouts that a horrible incident occurred the day before. Because a member of the group was assaulted within the walls that represent justice, and to make matters worse, the perpetrator was none other than Deputy Inho Gil. The chief announces that the old man will be exiled, while he wonders why this is happening if he did nothing. The assaulted woman remains silent. Approaching, the monarch states that he did not want things to reach that point. However, since the deputy is no longer useful and acted as if he were the leader, he had no other choice. With a crazy look, Park hands the old man the golden badge of Congress to help him get special treatment elsewhere. Holding back tears, the deputy concludes that he has been manipulated all this time and promises that he will make the policeman pay for all of this. Suddenly, walking in the snow, he hears a noise and is brutally attacked by Nerpentes due to the necklace around his neck. Jianwoo ends the meeting and orders everyone to return to work. Two people who were whispering about the situation are interrupted by a police officer who tells them to stop chatting. A little further away, the protagonist asks if Choi can use that situation to divide the police and the people. Without directly provoking, smiling, the criminal says he understands that he needs to discreetly turn them against each other. Therefore, he will stir the pot a little without anyone noticing. The next morning, an officer bursts into the chief's office due to an emergency. Dressing up, the monarch says that whatever it is, it's better to be important. The police officer then says that a colleague from the night patrol was attacked, and from the state, it seems that it was someone from within who did it. At the crime scene, we see the fallen officer, and around him, phrases written on the wall reveal that it wasn't Inho who assaulted the woman. Furious, the chief asks who had dared to do that to one of his men. Two civilians comment that the responsible party deserves congratulations since everyone knows the deputy was innocent. The monarch hears everything and, grabbing the clothes of one of the boys, tells him to be careful with what he says. He then orders that the duo be interrogated and subsequently exiled as they are inciting a rebellion against the police. The young man shouts that he did nothing, but the man asserts that any act of violence of that kind will be seen as a challenge. Directly hears authority, thus anyone who disagrees is free to leave. When asked if there is a possibility for Park to discover who was responsible for that, Choi tells his ally the same. You can rest assured, as operating in the shadows is his specialty, which means they just need everything to stay as it is. We see Ogre that was captured writhing. However, everything changes when he hears a sound made by Cyan using 2 iron bars. Remembering the sound he heard at the station, the young man concludes that he will need an instrument that can produce strong vibrations. We discover that when the creature reacts to the sound, it is rewarded with its favorite food. But when it is about to eat, it gets hit by Jin, and the whole process repeats. Excited, our boy says that if the training works, he will have a great advantage. Suddenly, a message appears notifying that the Ogre's Den dungeon has been released and that the territory of the creatures has been unlocked, which means the boy can expand the range of explorations. Additionally, we see that the mission to save the precinct has been completed and another has emerged in its place. We are taken to the monarch's office, where he is very happy with the progress made by the protagonist. Even more so now that the food supply issue has been completely resolved and the ogres have been tamed. Kang mentions that he noticed a tension in the air and asks if something happened. Park talks about the attacks on the night patrol officers and says that because of this, he had to interrogate and exile some civilians. The problem is that this alone does not seem to be enough. Our boy says that it is not a good time to worry about people's reactions. A few days later, upon seeing a guillotine being installed, everyone discovers how cruel Jianwoo is. Shocked by the situation, the protagonist states that the man has gone too far, and remembering the conversation he had with him, quickly concludes that this was the plan all along. The only good part is that people will lose faith in the police. We find out that before that happened, the young man received the mission to defeat a monarch and announce a decree to conclude. Everyone starts pressuring him, saying that it's already past time for talk. Inside the precinct, Kim tries to understand what his boss has in mind. Cheongjun asserts that as police officers, they need to establish order in difficult times, and that in the end, it is all for the safety of the hostages, so the young man should stop thinking nonsense and go deliver the report. So Gaeyoung decides to just agree and compose himself. But upon approaching the monarch's office, he encounters a woman crawling while begging for help. The chief's hand grabs her hair, and he says that he already warned that no police officer there will save her, since his men follow orders. Completely in shock, the rookie officer orders the man to let the woman go if he doesn't want to be arrested. Jianwoo does not react, and the young man states that he is being held for 3 different crimes. The man then asks if he still doesn't understand the situation and how dare he challenge the monarchy. Kim says that even if he is exiled, he will carry out his duty and asks once again for his boss to let the woman go. However, to his misfortune, the monarch decides to show how absolute his laws are, and opening a decree reminds the young man that the penalty for challenging him is death. Black ropes grab the rookie's body, who ends up losing his life in a brutal blow. Everyone is shocked, but no one does anything, returning to their office with the woman. Park tells his men to clean up the mess and publish a statement claiming that yet another police officer was killed by a civilian. Thus, after blaming someone, they can exile. After some time outside, someone begs for their life. More than anything, it is useless, and everyone is in shock as they witness the guillotine being used for the first time. Smiling, the monarch says that order does not maintain itself, and that without actions, rules are just words. Therefore, from that moment on, anyone who commits any serious crime will be sentenced to death. Jongkil tells a woman that they need to get out of there urgently, even if they have to go to Donghak. Amid the chaos, we see Cheyenne being pressured to do something. Upon hearing the young man call them, Choi says she's ready to follow orders. Later that night, the chief comments that now people truly understand who is in charge. He then asks the protagonist to help himself. When asked who the first man on Earth was, the young man says it was Homo sapiens. However, the man states that, in fact, the first man was the first monkey to lie, since this is the first step in the strategy for personal gain. For this reason, he believes that the Li will mark the beginning of a new era, and that from that moment on, humans will kill to get ahead. After hearing several outrageous statements, our boy says he doesn't quite agree. Unbothered, Park says he likes the young man as if he were his nephew, especially after he stated that it was not the time to worry about people's reactions. Cheyenne decides to ask what happened to Kim, and the man reveals without hesitation that he killed him for stepping out of line. The protagonist does not wait for a toast and drinks all the wine at once. Then he slams the glass down on the table and asks if the monarch plays chess. The latter says he hasn't played in a long time, but the young man doesn't care and clears all the food off the table, claiming that chess is called the game of kings, which makes it very fitting. We discover that Kang's plan is to keep the chief entertained for at least an hour. Elsewhere, the police conduct their night patrol while complaining about how absurd it is for them to be working while civilians are sleeping. One man comments that something seems off, but his colleague says that the number of police has doubled and there is no reason to worry. Suddenly, a noise catches everyone's attention, and they finally realize that those people are not really sleeping. Grabbing one of the men, Choi says there is no need to be afraid, as if he stays still, everything will turn out fine. Meanwhile, officers realize that the second-floor patrol team has not reported in and begin to descend to catch the culprit behind the attacks. However, a civilian appears and starts attacking the hammer. The man is eventually taken down by a police officer with a baton. Due to the number of enemies, the officers decide to put their shields on the line. A young man comments to the thug that they are dealing with trained people, but the latter claims to have more experience, so they just need to follow his orders and not forget that those guys put innocents in the guillotine. The speech motivates the others, who decide to go all in. Giving it their all, a police officer asks the civilian to stop that. Clearing a path through the shields, Choi says it was they who caused this. Suddenly, he is hit by a knife while saying that things would be resolved if the men surrendered. With a single punch, the thug takes out the officer, claiming it was in self-defense. Remembering what he discussed with Cyan, he concludes that it is time to show who is in charge and loudly states that from that moment on, the police are also civilians, but if they retaliate, they will die. Meanwhile, in the monarch's office, Park says he is not that bad at chess. Amid the sound of our boy sobs and praises him right after. Thinking, the young man says that delaying the game is wearing him out, but since everything will end soon, he decides to deliver a checkmate. The man says he thought he would win as his vision darkens. Suddenly, he falls face first onto the board, snoring. Jin asks if his ally is okay. He says yes, and that the next step is to tie up Janwoo. Out of nowhere, police burst into the office shouting that the civilians are starting a riot, but they find Kang tying up the chief. Getting straight to the point, the protagonist states that they must choose between accepting him as monarch or siding with Park. After a few minutes of silence, everyone surrenders. Watching everything from another world, Ka says that this is very interesting. Administrator Ji approaches and says that apparently not much is happening in the area she's overseeing, which means the superiors will complain. Turning around, the administrator states that everything is fine, as this is exactly what their boss is like. The day after the coup, we discovered that there were still two things the protagonist needed to do. The first was to clean up the house within the police force, as some of the boss's supporters refused to cooperate and had to be detained. The second task, which was more complicated, involved figuring out what to do with the boss and how to take over the position. Outside, civilians shout that the man deserves to be executed by guillotine. Cheyenne appears and asking for attention reminds everyone of the steps that brought them here. He then asserts that they need to maintain the same dedication if they want to face and survive in this new world. However, since Jianwu committed all kinds of atrocities, a new monarch needed to be chosen. Shouting, the protagonist promises that, as leader, he will establish a new order, and that after the boss is exiled, the guild will be reformed. Everyone shouts the young man's name. Jin approaches with a fresh haircut, and Chota comments that apparently someone has already started making changes. Reminding that the league is a battle between guilds, the young woman concludes that the real challenge begins now. Ka appears out of nowhere and claims that Cheyenne should kill the monarch and take the title by force instead of making a speech. The protagonist asks if the woman is trying to use the rules as an excuse to carry out a massacre. Irritated, the administrator shouts and says that since he has come this far, he will have 6 months to become the monarch democratically. Therefore, she will set a goal of 90% approval. Nervous, Kang wonders how he will get 90% of those people to agree. We are taken back a few minutes. When to recognize the protagonist, Ko appears and says she hates being around those inferior beings. She then states that she did what she was told and that now the second round will be very chaotic. The boy comments that our guy seems to be avoiding killing at all costs, which shows she's wasting time with the wrong guy. Smiling, the administrator understands that she will need to prove that the young man has what it takes to be a monarch. Back in the present moment, we see that Kang has become the new leader and is already very popular. The protagonist asks what those messages mean, but the administrator states that she will only answer if he reveals why he hasn't killed Park yet. With nothing to do, the young man says that killing is not his thing and that the man can still be useful. Elsewhere, Jisoo receives Janwoo as a gift along with a letter. Smiling, the woman says that the boy is a man according to her heart, so she will leave Manhack alone for now, until she finds out if the new monarch is a good companion for her. 6 months later, we see that the city has risen again and local commerce is booming. Moreover, the ogre walks around following the commands of a man. Far from there, Jin says that Cheyenne has made good progress, but he still doesn't seem capable of cutting a building in half. The young man asks her not to compare them, but the sword star reminds him that the mission of this second round will begin soon. Acknowledging this, our boy, who is now ranked D, prepares to continue training. It is revealed that the police station is now called Mangayong, and as soon as the boiler was restarted, more people began to appear. This forced the protagonist to create a monetary system to accommodate the growing numbers. Additionally, over time, the settlement transformed into a city-state with different departments, and Jonghyul became the head of the operations department, while Choi commanded the special task force that used the domesticated ogres to carry out missions. We see Jin fighting with Cam again, who apparently is still not strong enough even after training every day. The young woman says he is improving, but he needs to stop wasting so much energy when fighting, and start thinking about how to defeat higher-ranked players, as unifying Enyang will be the best way to find Juno. The story goes back 6 months when the young man discovered all the advantages a monarch possesses, which includes a trading market. Thinking, he concludes that he can communicate with the other leaders and asks about his little brother. Ka suggests that the boy replace the old decrees. After reflecting for a bit, our boy declares that all guild members have the right to freedom and life, as long as they defend the group's territory. Moreover, he states that the days of violence are over, as his focus is on unity for reconstruction. Everyone claps and celebrates the new regime. The administrator says she is very happy to have witnessed that up close, so as a special reward, it will reveal that Chuno is alive. The protagonist advances towards the woman, and she reminds him that those who attack an admin die. When asked why she is keeping an eye on the little one, Ka says that Cheyenne has been attracting the attention of the superiors. Therefore, it is normal for them to observe everything. Thus, if he manages to unify Enyang, she will tell him where his brother is. A bit in shock from the revelation, our boy orders Jahu to tell him everything she knows about the rest of the second round. The young woman then says that first he needs to get stronger, as the war will boil down to a battle of artifact users. And it is at that moment that she states she will train him every day. We discover that besides Jin, there are 2 other rank S players in Korea. One is in Seoul, throwing himself off a huge building, while Admin mocks the fact that the boy keeps trying to take his own life, instead of using his abilities to absorb the life of other players. Zhang Liano, who has the Predator artifact, simply stares at the creature. The other rank S player, or rather player, is located on Mount Tabaek in Gangwon Province. Her name is Missen Park, and her artifact is brainwashing. We return to see the territory of Donghak, where the slaves will finally stop working to eat. One of these slaves is Jueyang, who is trying to steal food from the women and children, while devising a plan to rescue her brother. Looking to the side, the young woman sees a little boy who apparently is also a slave. Without thinking twice, she offers him her rice cake and says he needs it more than she does. When asked how he ended up there, the little one simply says that she is lucky. He begins to levitate and then reveals that he was tired of waiting for his brother and was going to run away. But first, he would kill all the bad people, and since she is not one of those people, she can come with him. We see that Juno, besides being alive, is a rank S player who uses an unknown artifact. Elsewhere, we see someone looking for a place to rest, knowing that Donghak is dominated by its queen and the guild has been expanding into Yuwang territory. The person wonders how the other group has survived so long if they are right next door. Curious, a stranger decides to go to Mangaon and quickly arrives at the border control center. She is impressed by how high the morale of the public living there is, and at the counter, she says she is a nomad and would like to stay for a few days. Yonaha, the border control director, states that the young woman will need to pay for the time she will stay. Seeing the little one talking to two young people about where some documents are, the nomad concludes that she has an intellectual ability. We see that this is indeed the case and that the director's ability is the memory palace. Returning her attention to the young girl, the little one says that violence in that place is not tolerated and the currency is lighters. Putting a radio on the table, the red-haired girl claims that she will not find a more expensive device than that nowadays and asks if she can exchange batteries for lighters as well. We discover that her name is Hyunji Choi. Yunha agrees and says that the nomad's accommodation is at the end of the road. Impressed by how peaceful the guild is, the young woman wonders why no one there seems worried about Donghak. Suddenly, she sees an ogre strolling through the streets and is even happier to have found that place. Meanwhile, Cyan thinks that it has been 6 months since he put the boiler project up for sale. Outside, Jin asks if he thinks he can handle the second guild of Manhak alone. Our boy says that the place is much smaller than Mangaon, but the group may have its own players. And besides, there must be a reason they have managed to last so long. So thinking about what she said about facing other people, he decided that he will try to do that alone. But if something goes wrong, Jihui should save him. At the school, the former director, who is the monarch of the second guild, orders them to move, while thinking that even with just a bunch of kids and a few surviving teachers, he will not hand over the route easily to Mangaon. We discover that the man has a catapult as a weapon, and his goal is to show Cheyenne what it can do, to later make a deal and become the commander of some department. Suddenly, the entire environment begins to shake, due to the arrival of the protagonist, who decided to go as an ogre. The monarch orders his men to prepare the catapult and not let the size of the creature affect them. In the blink of an eye, the man is hit and falls to the ground. Ringing a bell, our boy commands the ogre to attack the guild's weapon. He then states that he has no intention of killing anyone, only recruiting them for his guild. Without thinking twice, the survivors surrender and say they have always wanted to live in Mangaon. The protagonist asks Choi to secure the area and take everyone to a safe location. Excited, the bandit gives Jin a pat on the back, who can only think about how he sometimes crosses the line. Approaching the young woman, Kang reveals that he is worried that only the two of them are artifact users. The girl says she will think of a solution, but he needs to remember that time is running out. Meanwhile, in a region of the Anian River border, a group of 4 people makes a risky crossing. A young man carrying another on his back asks his friend to hold on just a little longer. We learn that the Anian River is the only source of drinking water and also serves as the border between Donghak and Manhak. Recently, there's been an increase in cases of Manhak citizens being attacked by enemy forces while collecting water. In our boys' room, Jaehui suggests taking out the opponents alone, but the young man asserts that this would only drag them into a war, which would be a problem since Donghak has 5 times more resources. Even so, he concludes that it is time to draw attention, as if he wants to unify the place. He will have to confront Donghak at some point. Determined to respond to recent provocations, the protagonist remembers the catapult and says he needs to meet with the monarch of the Third Guild. We are taken to the vassal state, where the monarch of the Third Guild offers the little food he has to Cyan. The man asks if there are any updates on the merger agreement between the guild and Mangaon. However, the protagonist says that an agreement only works when there's mutual trust, and since his guild is far from Mangaon, saving troops to protect them is not something that can be done easily, so he thought of a way where everyone wins, which is declaring war against the Third Guild. Shaking all over, the monarch asks the young man to reconsider and promises that he will be loyal. Explaining, our boy says that he does not want the war itself, just the rumors that it is happening. Therefore, if he agrees to help, he will receive soldiers and catapults, and in the end, if all goes well, the Anian River will be theirs and it will be possible to reap greater rewards from Donghak. We are taken to enemy territory, where Jisoo is being taken to the emergency room after being hit by an arrow. Thinking, the woman says she thought the war against Yu Wang would end quickly, and pulling out the arrow, she declares that she will kill everyone who is part of the guild. It is at this moment that the news of the war between the first and second guilds of Manhak arrives. Meanwhile, in the Bisan district, Kang realizes that the rumors that the place is in no man's land were true. Then he and Jin arrive at the shopping center where the first round took place. We discover that this district is technically under Donghak's control, but in practice, it functions as neutral territory between Manhak and Donghak. Due to its independence, many nomads move there, and the only reason the place has grown so much is that it allows gambling and a few other bad things. Moreover, everything is run by a woman known as Madam, who, although not a monarch, is seen by all as a leader. Smiling, the woman says she came as quickly as she could, and that it is a pleasure to meet the monarch of Manhwa. Getting straight to the point, the protagonist says he is there to propose an agreement, thinking he remembers how he did not want to get involved in politics, but that is no longer possible. Thus, knowing that cigarettes are the accepted form of currency in most areas, he asks Jahui to stock them up, for when necessary, placing 10 packs of cigarettes in front of Madam and stating that this is just an entry. He asks the woman not to share anything about Mangayong with Donghak when the war begins, and just to schedule a meeting with Jisoo for him. When asked why he is doing this, our boy says she will find out soon. Taking the cigarettes, the leader says she will do what was asked. After all, in her lands, everything is done for payment, while thinking that the due's artifacts are as powerful as the Queen of Donghak's, which means it is impossible to predict who will come out victorious. We are taken to the police station, where a woman updates Jongkyul on the progress of the tasks. Carrying a backpack, Kang announces that until that moment, Mangayong is under war protocol. Therefore, he wants a detailed report on the resources available for a large-scale battle against Donghak the next day. Entering the room where the cigarettes are kept, the young man feels relieved by the quantity, while thinking that as soon as the moment arrives, he will start attacking the enemy forces near the river, which will bring Donghak there. Outside, workers are setting up the catapults. Choi says that the weapons look even cooler up close and asks if the teacher is sure everything is ready for the attack. Confirming, the man who used to teach math says he has finished all the calculations, and holding a bottle full of oil and nepenthes stems, he feels relieved that it is just a scare. The bandit tells the young man not to worry and says it is just a test. At night, in Donghak territory near the river, an archer says she has a bad feeling because of Mangayong's silence. Suddenly, something catches the attention of the pair of guards. It is several bright little lights coming in their direction. When they look closer, they realize they are Molotov cocktails. But it is too late, and the fire quickly spreads. The guards ask how the enemies managed to throw the bottles so far. Someone appears and asks if they are the bounty hunters. Shouting, a young man asks how Choi has the courage to come there alone. Without answering, the bandit strikes, and after the young man falls, he claims that they were the ones who started it, which means they should apologize. Other men try to put out the fire with water, but they end up being attacked by Kang's special forces, who are determined to eliminate all the hunters from that place. After a day, the mission is completed, and the protagonist discovers that his side had no casualties. He asks the math teacher to make a report on the performance of the Molotov cocktails. Jin says that what they did is not much different from the idea she gave about killing the hunters. Disagreeing, our boy says it is indeed different, since attacking first would be seen as a declaration of war. But that was just revenge, and since Donghak's territory is at war with Yu Wang, the woman will have to distribute her forces. Thus, with Madam's help, Mangayong will be able to reach the negotiation table using the river as leverage, which means it is only a matter of time before Jisoo gets in touch. Suddenly, a man appears shouting that there is someone at the front gate. We see the Queen of Donghak stating that she left that territory quiet because of the gift she received. But now things have changed a little. Inside a room, the woman says that Cheyenne is stirring the pots quite well, and that she would like him to stop the military actions related to the Anyang River and the Third Guild. Being honest, she says she could attack Mangayong at that moment, but she will not do that, because to pass the second round is necessary for 2 guilds to remain in Anyang. Reflecting, the protagonist concludes that the woman did not receive the unification mission. Eating, Jisoo says she knows he wants to merge the guilds, but there's no reason for that because, to begin with, they were never enemies, so they should think about how to defeat a certain player residing in Muwang. To convince the young man, she places a gemstone on the table, stating that the item is an alien mineral resource unlike any other on Earth, and how the system declared the river as a resource and encouraged the guilds to fight for it. Whoever monopolizes such resources will win the league. The woman extends her hand for them to close a deal. Thinking, Science says that even with all this information, the queen wants to negotiate peace, which means she has no proof that it was her people who attacked at the river. However, to find Juno, he needs to come out on top in the negotiation. Thus, he loudly states that he has nothing to do with the attacks and knows that Donghak will not come out unscathed in case of war. Since he needs to negotiate with Yu Wang as well, that is why he took care of everything alone. The monarch of the Third Guild enters the room, and the protagonist says that the system does not want peace, announcing when the man surrenders that the second round ends there. Seeing the messages that say spring has arrived, Jisoo goes outside to see what is happening. We find out that Jahui told the young man that the third round will require them to overcome their human limitations. That is why he decided to raise an external wall with the help of the ogres. Since from that moment on, all kinds of monsters will awaken. The queen's assistant tries to attack the young man, but ends up losing his arm with a single sword strike from Jin. Smiling, our boy tells Jisoo that the creatures are heading to the area where she and Yu Wang were fighting. Therefore, it would be better for the monarch to stay by his side. After their chat, we see her leaving amidst a chorus of insults, and we find out that our boy made her agree to deliver Bizin in exchange for a 1-month truce. In the carriage, the woman promises that she will get Kang for herself, while he thinks that the minute the treaty expires, his territory will be in danger. Turning around, the young man asks his allies to focus on preparations for the war that will happen the following month. Meanwhile, at the Mangaon border, civilians are trying to prevent the creatures from crossing the wall. Hyunji asks Yunha to let her meet the monarch, but the little girl refuses. Suddenly, someone shouts to warn the director about the danger. A creature smiles and prepares to have a snack, but is stopped by the nomad who, using her scythe, crashes the party. She then states that now that she has saved the child, she would like to meet the leader of the place. The crowd is shocked by the young woman's skill, and right there in the midst of the people, Jin reveals that she was his superior in a past life. In addition to being second in command under Cyan and one of the strongest rank of players. Shocked, the Sword Star says she didn't expect to find the girl there. Upon hearing that she is a nomad, the protagonist asserts that in that case, he will need to use his persuasion skills to make her stay. However, Jehui says that this will be easier than he imagines as they have what she needs. After the commotion, Hyunji delights in eating noodles. Kang enters the room and, handing her a can of Coca-Cola, says that the young woman is as impressive as her reputation. Shaking all over, the player wonders if she is really seeing that. We find out that since the beginning of the apocalypse, she has spent almost 2 years searching for a can of Coca-Cola. Placing the can on the table, the protagonist reveals that he would like to ask her to fight for his guild. Almost throwing herself at him to grab the soda, the girl says she will do whatever the young man wants. Then she takes a sip and celebrates her conquest. A few minutes later, we see our boy, Jin, and Yuna following the player down a path that should lead to Donghak. After finishing the drink, the young redhead says that Nomans share good things among themselves. Then she welcomes Smack Dab, which is located in the center of Donghak. The group settles in a building. Our boy asks the director to gather as much information as she can, but if it starts to seem dangerous, she should leave. Excited, the little girl says she will remember to report every enemy movement with her ability. With only a month until the war, we find out that Choi is teaching the citizens everything he knows about combat, and moreover, efforts to develop weapons have been increased. A month later, the non-aggression pact expires. Amidst the rain, Jisoo comments on everything she has done up to that moment with her people and states that she will no longer sit idly by watching. Therefore, as the strong must govern the weak, they must charge forward and take everything they can and show the enemies what true freedom is. With this, everyone shouts in confirmation. Meanwhile, in Manhwa, Cheyenne tells his allies to ask themselves why they are there and why they wish to fight to protect the guild. He then asserts that the answer is because they see the chance for a real future where it is possible to live with dignity. Everyone begins to remember the things they have suffered, while the young man promises that they will bring down Donghak and make them witness the story of his people's survival. Shouting, the crowd shows they are ready to fight to the end. A man arrives and informs the protagonist that the enemies are moving towards the Bizan and Anyang station, and it has already been 2 days since they last heard from Yona. Shine concludes that the girl has been captured and decides to send Jehui and Hyunji to the station. Watching everything from another world, the entities comment on how they were eager for the war to begin and start betting on who will be the winner of the conflict. Kull appears and says she is happy to see that they are enjoying the show. Paying the entrance fee, one entity asks which of the monarchs she thinks will win. Giving her humble opinion, the admiral states that she believes Jisoo will come out victorious. Elsewhere, someone praises the woman for her work. Lying in the lap of a masked young woman, Ka says that everything she does is for her. The stranger says she is not so sure that the young man will lose. We discovered that Donghak made the first move against Mangaon and divided its troops into two, sending them to the Anyang and Bizan stations. We are taken to an apartment complex where the war is happening in full swing. The protagonist's men fire as soon as the enemy gets close enough. However, the masked woman manages to defend herself and leaps into the air using a creature as a horse. When everyone realizes the danger is already too late, Choi appears and asks if the young woman is a Donghak player. He then states that he is eager to battle one of the enemies. Both charge into direct confrontation, but the bandit seems to be at a disadvantage. Even so, he manages to hit his opponent's means of transportation, which falls to the ground. Seizing the opportunity, the man prepares to attack from above. However, he only ends up breaking the young woman's mask in half before receiving a shove. Smiling, he says that the young woman does not live up to the hype she has. The enemy grabs her spear and charges into the attack. She moves Choi in several different places, and he thinks that perhaps it wasn't a good idea to provoke her, since his enemy doesn't even seem to be using any powers, but is still very strong. He is hit in the shoulder, which frightens the other soldiers. Shouting, the man orders everyone to return to the building and prepare to regroup with the main unit. The woman watches everyone leave while the bandit claims that she will not leave there unscathed. Her plan to lure the enemies inside the building goes wrong as the young woman also decides to retreat. A man warns the protagonist about the defeat, and he says that in that case, they must prepare for the second battle. Thinking, our boy concludes that the enemy was just testing their defenses and that Jisoo's plan is to attack the Anyang and Bizan stations simultaneously. Jin offers to go to the district, but Cheyenne says that he will be the one to go. We are taken to the Donghak Guild's meeting point, where Sophie says that the enemy's defenses seemed weak, almost as if everything was part of a trap. The queen says she expected Kang to keep things interesting and claims that they can set as many traps as they want, for in the end, it will explode from the inside out. We return to see the buildings that started to catch fire after being attacked by a player. Shocked, Hayasu cannot take his eyes off the enemy, who down there amidst the flames smiles back at him. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.